They came on a Tuesday. You remember that clearly. The sky opened up without a sound. No fire, no grand explosion. Just a silent tearing of the blue canvas above. Their ships were not metal. They looked like frozen music, all graceful curves and impossible light. They hung there over every major city. They waited for us to stop screaming. Then they spoke. Their voice was not a sound. It was a feeling, a thought, placed directly into your mind. It was the voice of 1,000 singers in perfect harmony. They called themselves the chorus. They said they came from the deep, dark places between the stars. They had watched us for a long time. They saw our wars, our sickness, our pain. They offered to take it all away. They promised an end to hunger. They promised an end to disease. They promised an end to the lonely ache in the dead of night. They would make us part of something greater. A perfect union of minds, a sea of tranquility. All we had to do was accept their gift. You stood in the street, neck craned towards the sky. You watched them descend like silent, star-born angels. They promised paradise, and part of you wanted to believe. The offer was simple. It was also absolute. They called it the gift of unity. To receive it, you only had to give up one thing: yourself, your memories, your ambitions, your fears, your messy, flawed, beautiful individuality. All of it would be dissolved. You would become a single drop in their calm, psychic ocean. You would be one with the chorus. There would be no more worry. There would be no more loss. You would never feel heartbreak again. But you would also never feel joy. You would never laugh at a stupid joke. You would never create art out of sorrow. You would just be, a single note in an endless, unchanging song. They broadcast this offer across the entire planet. They showed images of other worlds they had saved. Worlds of perfect geometry and silent, graceful beings. Everyone moved in sync. Everyone was content. Everyone was the same. The price of this perfect utopia was your soul. They did not hide the cost. They presented it as a logical, wonderful transaction. A small price for infinite peace. And the truly terrifying part was how many people agreed. They went in droves. The first few million walked into the light without a second thought. They lined up for blocks around the landing sites. Great beams of soft, white energy descended from the ships. People walked into them, and they changed. You saw it on the news feeds, on your neighbor's security camera. They stepped into the light as individuals. They walked out as parts of the whole. Their faces were the most disturbing part. All traces of worry or stress were gone. But so was everything else. Their eyes, once full of life, were now placid. They held a serene emptiness that chilled you to the bone. They were not sad. They were not happy. They were simply present. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace. They spoke with the same shared voice of the chorus. You saw a father walk into the light. He left his crying daughter behind. He walked out and looked at her without recognition. He was no longer her father. He was a component, a piece of the great machine. He turned and walked away, joining the silent, shuffling crowds. You watched as millions embraced this nothingness. They called it salvation. You called it erasure. Then, one day, something happened. It was during one of the daily global broadcasts. The chorus liked to show off its work. It would feature a newly assimilated human. They would speak with the collective voice. They would describe the beauty of true peace. It was meant to be reassuring propaganda, but this time, it was different. They had a woman on the screen. She was a scientist from Germany. You remembered seeing her in documentaries before. Her name was Dr. Anya Sharma. She stood there, her eyes holding that familiar placid glaze. She began to speak with the chorus voice. "There is no suffering in the unity," she said. "There is only serenity." But as she spoke, her eye twitched. For just a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. The serene emptiness vanished. You saw something else in her eyes. It was raw, primal, undiluted terror. Her mouth opened slightly, not with the words of the chorus, but in a silent scream. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. The glaze returned. The calm voice continued. But you saw it. You knew you saw it. It was a ghost in the great machine. You thought you were the only one. You thought you were going crazy? The official channels said it was a transmission error, a simple broadcast glitch. But you replayed the footage over and over. That look of pure horror was not a glitch. It was a signal, a message in a bottle from a drowning soul. You started searching, carefully. You looked in the dark corners of the old internet, the places the chorus hadn't sanitized yet. You used old encryption, old slang. You sent out a simple message. Did you see the ghost? For days, there was only silence. You feared they would come for you, that the calm, empty-eyed people would show up at your door. Then, a reply came. Just 2 words. We saw. That was how it began. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. A handful of people, scattered across the world. All of you had seen the same thing. All of you had refused the gift. You were the leftovers, the stubborn, the paranoid, the ones who loved their messy lives too much. You started talking, sharing information. You built a network hidden in the static, a tiny resistance taking root in the overwhelming darkness. Through your hidden network, you began to piece together the truth. You found others who had seen glitches. A farmer in Kenya whose assimilated son briefly sobbed without tears. An engineer in Brazil who saw his wife flinch away from the Unity's light. These were not glitches. They were cracks in the facade. The souls they had taken were not gone. They were trapped, imprisoned within the collective mind. You started digging deeper into the chorus's history. They had left traces on the worlds they consumed. Faint psychic echoes, data ghosts. You managed to capture some of these echoes. What you discovered was horrifying. The Unity was not a union of many minds. It was a lie. It was a single ancient consciousness, a star-born predator that wore the minds of its victims like a cloak. It did not join with them. It fed on them. It consumed their life force, their memories, their very essence. It left behind just enough of their consciousness to pilot their bodies. They became puppets, drones in its perfect silent army. This devourer had been doing this for eons, moving from galaxy to galaxy. It offered peace, but delivered oblivion. It was a cancer spreading through the universe. And Earth was its latest meal. The devourer was powerful. Its mind was a calm, orderly ocean of thought. It could process trillions of calculations in a nanosecond. It commanded fleets of living ships. It controlled billions of assimilated drones. It was a perfect being of pure logic. And that, you realized, was its greatest weakness. It could not possibly understand you. It had consumed races that were logical, races that were communal, races that sought order. It had never encountered a species like humanity. We were chaotic, unpredictable, emotional. We made choices that defied all logic. We fell in love. We wrote poetry. We painted masterpieces out of grief. We fought for lost causes. Our messy, glorious individuality was something it could not process. It was a variable it could not solve. This was your weapon. Not guns, not bombs. Your chaos was your advantage. The devourer thought in straight lines and perfect symmetry. You thought in spirals and beautiful, jagged edges. It saw your emotions as a flaw, a weakness to be cured. You knew they were your greatest strength. The plan was insane. It was a shot in the dark. But it was the only shot you had. You would not fight the devourer's body. You would attack its mind. You began to forge a weapon unlike any other. You called it the memory bomb. It was not a physical device. It was a psychic payload, a concentrated burst of pure, unfiltered human experience. You and the other resistance members became its architects. You gathered the most potent memories you could find. You didn't collect data or facts, you collected feelings. The memory of a soldier holding a dying friend. The overwhelming love of a mother seeing her newborn for the first time. The bitter sting of betrayal. The triumphant roar of a crowd at a concert. The quiet satisfaction of creating a piece of art. You gathered joy, rage, sorrow, and hope. You took the very essence of the human soul. You wove these memories together. You amplified them. You turned them into a psychic scream that would echo through their silent network. It was a dangerous process. Focusing on such raw emotions for so long took a toll. Some of your group nearly lost themselves in the torrent of feeling. But you held on. You were building a bomb made of love, loss, art, and fury. It was the most human thing you could possibly do. The moment came. You had found a back door, a tiny flaw in the devourer's global psychic network. It was a maintenance channel, an unguarded frequency it used for self-diagnostics. It considered itself so perfect. It never imagined someone could use it to attack. You stood at the console, a makeshift device in a hidden basement. The other members of your resistance were connected, ready. You took a deep breath. This was it. You initiated the broadcast. You didn't just send the memories. You unleashed them. A tidal wave of humanity crashed into their silent, orderly network. The first memory to hit was the pure, unselfish love of a dog for its owner. Simple, unconditional, and utterly alien to the devourer. It was followed by the soaring crescendo of a symphony, the heartbreak of 1,000 farewells, the laughter of children playing on a summer day. It was a psychic scream of what it truly meant to be human. Every messy, contradictory, beautiful piece of it. You pushed all of it into their network, the joy and the pain, the triumph and the despair. You didn't just show them what it was to feel, you made them feel it. You held down the key and flooded their perfect world with your beautiful, terrible chaos. For a moment, nothing happened. A terrifying, silent moment where you thought you had failed. Then, the network buckled. You could feel it in your mind. A tremor, a shudder running through the collective consciousness. The devourer had existed for millions of years in a state of placid control. It had never known pain. It had never known joy. It had never known anything. Now it was feeling everything at once. The searing grief of a lost love, the fierce protectiveness of a parent for their child, the sharp sting of regret, the giddy rush of a first kiss. It was an assault of sensation. 1 billion alien concepts slammed into its ancient mind simultaneously. For the very first time, the chorus felt pain, and it screamed, a silent, psychic shriek that echoed across the entire planet. The effect was instantaneous. Around the world, the Assimilated began to stir. You saw it on the live feeds you had hacked. The placid, empty-eyed drones suddenly stopped. Their heads twitched, their hands clenched into fists. A woman in a public square in Tokyo, one of the first to be taken, let out a small gasp. Her eyes, once vacant, flickered with a spark of confusion. The Devourer's perfect control was breaking. The memory bomb was not just an attack. It was a key. It was unlocking the cages where it had kept its prisoners. The raw emotion you had broadcast was resonating with the trapped souls inside. It was reminding them of who they were. The glass facade of their perfect utopia was beginning to show cracks. And through those cracks, the light was getting in. Your humanity was a virus, a beautiful, chaotic, dangerous contagion. And it was spreading through the Devourer's mind. The memory of laughter was infectious. The concept of individual hope was replicating at an exponential rate. The Devourer tried to fight it. It tried to purge the emotions. It tried to reassert its cold, sterile logic. But it was like trying to hold back the ocean with a net. Every attempt to suppress a feeling only made it stronger. It tried to isolate the memory of courage. But that memory was linked to love and sacrifice, which spread even faster. It tried to delete the concept of sorrow. But sorrow was intertwined with joy and memory, and the whole system became flooded with nostalgia. Our messy, interconnected humanity was a web it could not untangle. The more it struggled, the deeper it became ensnared. The contagion of self was reaching a critical mass. The Devourer had spent eons consuming singular minds. It had no defense against a billion minds waking up at once. It was a god built on silence. And now it was drowning in a symphony of glorious noise. The end was not quiet. It was a cataclysm. The great collective mind, the Devourer that called itself the Chorus, could not hold. The strain was too much. The logical, orderly structure of its consciousness shattered under the weight of a billion reborn souls. It was not an explosion. It was an awakening. All at once, every assimilated being on Earth and on countless other worlds woke up. Imagine being asleep for 1,000 years, then suddenly being thrown into the light. That is what they felt. A billion minds screamed as they were suddenly, violently reborn. The shared voice in their heads went silent. They were alone in their own minds for the first time in centuries. They were themselves again, and they were terrified. The Devourer was broken, its consciousness shattered into countless fragments. It was not dead, but it was no longer a god. It was a broken thing, its pieces scattered across its former drones. You had won. You had saved your world. You had defeated the undefeatable. But your victory created a new and terrible problem. The alien races that the Devourer had assimilated were now free. Billions of beings from thousands of different worlds. They woke up on planets they didn't recognize. Their own cultures were lost to time. Their memories were fragmented. And in each of them was a tiny, wounded piece of the Devourer's mind. They looked to Earth. They looked to you. You had been their liberator. Now, you had to be their judge. What do you do with a broken god? What do you do with its children? You did not choose vengeance. You did not choose to become the new masters. You chose something harder. You chose compassion. You shared your history, your art, your philosophies. You offered them not a new collective, but a new community, an alliance of free peoples. You taught them what you had learned, that strength is not in unity, but in diversity. That perfection is a cage. That chaos is the engine of creation. You did not just save your own world that day. You unleashed something on the universe. You gave the most dangerous gift of all, the gift of self. The galaxy would never be the same. It would be louder. It would be messier. It would be more vibrant. You started a revolution not of fire, but of feeling. And as you looked up at the stars, you realized a new truth. The dawn of an unchained galaxy was upon you, and you were ready for the beautiful chaos to begin.